The moment I watched the CEO scroll through his phone while I presented the numbers that could destroy a $1.8 billion deal, I knew something was profoundly wrong. My voice carried across the executive conference room, clear and steady, but his eyes never left the screen in his hand. I had spent 3 weeks uncovering financial inconsistencies buried so deep, they required authorization codes I technically shouldn't have accessed, and he couldn't be bothered to look up. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and that morning in Chicago changed everything I thought I understood about loyalty, truth, and the cost of being right when powerful people need you to be wrong. Before we dive deeper into what happened next, I want to say something real for a moment. If you've ever felt invisible in a room full of people who should be listening, you're not alone. This story is for you. And if you want to see how this unfolds, how silence can cost billions, and how one person's integrity can shift everything, consider subscribing. I promise you won't regret it. Now, let's get back to that conference room where my career was about to explode. 48 hours after that presentation, the deal collapsed. Not slowly, not with warnings. It shattered like glass hitting concrete, and $1.8 billion evaporated before the markets even opened. By then, everyone wanted to know what went wrong, but I was the only person in that building who knew the answer, and I had tried to tell them from the beginning. 3 weeks before the deal fell apart, I sat in my office on the 14th floor of Meridian Capital, staring at a discrepancy that didn't make sense. The numbers were clean on the surface, polished and perfect, exactly what the board wanted to see. But I'd been working in financial analysis for 12 years, and I knew when something felt too neat. The acquisition target was Vanguard Dynamics, a mid-sized tech manufacturing firm with solid quarterly reports and a valuation that made them attractive. The purchase price was $1.8 billion, and our CEO, Derek Ashford, had been pushing this deal for 8 months. It was supposed to be his crowning achievement, the move that would define his legacy. I pulled up the third quarter earnings report again, cross-referencing it with supplier contracts I'd requested from legal. That's when I saw it. Revenue projections didn't align with the actual delivery schedules. The numbers claimed completed transactions that were still listed as pending in the operational database. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a clerical error. This was intentional inflation. I called my colleague, Marcus Chen, into my office. He leaned over my shoulder, squinting at the screen. "Are you seeing what I'm seeing?" I asked quietly. He exhaled slowly. "That's not good." "It's worse than not good," I said. "If these numbers are fabricated, the entire valuation is wrong. We'd be overpaying by at least 20%, maybe more." Marcus straightened, his face pale. "Sarah, you need to take this upstairs. Like now." I spent the next 2 days building a comprehensive report. I didn't sleep much. My daughter, Emma, asked me why I looked so tired when I picked her up from soccer practice. I told her I was working on something important. She hugged me and said, "You always work on important things, Mom." The morning of the executive meeting, I wore my navy suit, the one I saved for presentations that mattered. I printed the report in triplicate, bound each copy, and placed them in a leather folder. I rehearsed my key points on the drive downtown, navigating through morning traffic on the Kennedy Expressway. When I walked into the conference room, the energy felt charged. Derek Ashford sat at the head of the table, flanked by the CFO, Stephen Whitmore, and 3 senior board members. Derek was typing something on his phone, his expression distracted. "Good morning," I said, setting my materials on the table. Stephen nodded. Derek didn't look up. I began. "Thank you for taking the time to review these findings. Over the past 3 weeks, I've identified significant inconsistencies in Vanguard Dynamics financial reporting that directly impact the valuation of this acquisition." I opened the first report and pointed to the highlighted sections. Their Q3 revenue claims are contradicted by their operational delivery records. Transactions marked as completed were still in pending status as of last month. This suggests intentional misrepresentation. Derek's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, typed a response, and set it face down on the table. He still hadn't made eye contact with me. I continued, keeping my voice measured. "If these numbers are accurate, we're not looking at a $1.8 billion valuation. We're looking at closer to $1.4 billion, possibly less. Proceeding without further investigation exposes us to significant financial and reputational risk." Stephen leaned forward, studying the report. "How confident are you in this analysis?" "Very confident," I replied. "I've cross-referenced multiple data sources. The inconsistencies are consistent across all quarters." Derek finally spoke, his tone clipped. "Sarah, I appreciate your diligence, but we've had external auditors review Vanguard's financials. They cleared everything." I hesitated. With respect, the auditors may not have had access to the operational data I reviewed. These discrepancies only become visible when you layer the delivery schedules over the revenue claims. Derek picked up his phone again. I think we're overthinking this. Vanguard has been transparent throughout this process. Let's not create problems where none exist. A board member, Patricia Langston, glanced between us. Derek, shouldn't we at least verify Sarah's findings before moving forward? Derek waved a hand dismissively. We're on a tight timeline. The deal closes in 2 weeks. If we start second-guessing now, we risk losing the entire opportunity. I felt my chest tighten. Losing an overvalued deal isn't the worst outcome. Acquiring a company built on false numbers is. Derek's jaw tightened. He set his phone down with more force than necessary. Thank you, Sarah. We'll take your concerns under advisement. The meeting ended 5 minutes later. No one asked follow-up questions. No one requested additional documentation. They simply stood, gathered their materials, and left. Stephen caught my arm as I walked toward the door. Sarah, between you and me, I think you're onto something. But Derek has a lot riding on this. Tread carefully. I wanted to ask what that meant, but he was already gone. If this story is resonating with you, if you've ever been in a situation where speaking up felt dangerous but staying silent felt worse, drop the word truth in the comments below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. This is just the beginning, and what happens next will leave you speechless. Over the next 24 hours, I noticed the shifts, subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. I sent a follow-up email to Derek and Stephen, attaching the full report with additional supporting documentation. No response. I tried to schedule a meeting with Derek's assistant. He's booked solid for the next 2 weeks, she told me, avoiding eye contact. I walked past Stephen's office 3 times that afternoon. Each time he was on a call, door closed, blinds drawn. By the end of the day, I received a system notification that my access to certain financial databases had been restricted. I called IT. Sorry, Sarah, the technician said. Came down from the CFO's office. Security protocol update. For who? I asked. Just you. I sat at my desk, staring at the locked files on my screen. This wasn't protocol. This was containment. That evening, Marcus stopped by before heading home. People are talking, he said quietly. Word is Derek's furious. He thinks you're trying to sabotage the deal. I'm trying to save us from a disaster. I know that, Marcus said, but he doesn't see it that way. The next morning, I arrived early, hoping to catch Derek before the day spiraled into chaos. His office was dark. I checked with his assistant again. He's working from home today, she said. Then, softer. Sarah, I don't know what's going on, but be careful. I spent the morning double-checking my analysis, looking for any error I might have missed. There wasn't one. The numbers were wrong, and someone at Vanguard knew it. At noon, I received an email from an unknown address. The subject line was blank. The message contained a single attachment, a memo from Vanguard's internal compliance team, dated 6 months earlier, flagging the exact discrepancies I had identified. My hands shook as I read it. They knew. Vanguard's leadership knew their numbers were inflated, and they moved forward anyway. I forwarded the memo to Derek and Stephen with a single line. This confirms the issues I raised. We need to halt the deal immediately. 15 minutes later, Stephen called. Sarah, where did you get that? Does it matter? It's legitimate. You can't just... He stopped, exhaling sharply. Derek wants you to stop circulating this information. He says you're creating unnecessary panic. Panic? My voice rose despite my effort to stay calm. Stephen, we're about to acquire a company that's been lying about its financials for at least 6 months. How is that not worth panicking over? I'm telling you what he said. Back off, Sarah, for your own good. He hung up before I could respond. That afternoon, I was summoned to HR. The meeting was brief, sterile, and chilling. We've received concerns about your conduct, the HR director, Linda Graves, said, reading from a script. Specifically, unauthorized access to confidential information and insubordination. Unauthorized? I repeated, stunned. I was doing my job. I'm a senior analyst. Access to financial data is part of my role. Linda didn't look up. You've been placed on administrative leave pending further review. Please surrender your badge and laptop before you leave today. I stared at her, disbelief crashing over me. You're sidelining me 2 weeks before the deal closes? This is temporary, she said. We'll be in touch. I walked out of the building in a daze, my badge and laptop confiscated, my access severed. I sat in my car in the parking garage for 20 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to process what had just happened. They weren't ignoring me anymore. They were silencing me. But I still had copies of everything, and I wasn't done fighting. The next 24 hours felt like watching a slow-motion train wreck from a distance, knowing exactly where the crash would happen, but unable to stop it. I stayed home, officially on leave, but my phone didn't stop. Texts from colleagues asking what happened, missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize, an email from Patricia Langston, the board member who had questioned Derek during the meeting. Sarah, we need to talk, privately. Can you meet me tomorrow morning? I replied immediately. Yes. Where? She sent an address to a coffee shop in Lincoln Park, far from the office. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Derek's dismissive tone, Stephen's warning, Linda's scripted termination. They had built a wall around the truth, and I was on the outside. Emma knocked on my bedroom door around midnight. Mom, are you okay? I forced a smile. Yeah, sweetheart. Just work stuff. She climbed onto the bed and hugged me. You'll figure it out. You always do. I held her tighter than usual, wishing I felt as confident as she did. The next morning, I met Patricia at the coffee shop. She was already seated in a corner booth, 2 cups of coffee waiting. Thank you for coming, she said, her voice low. I couldn't say this at the office, but I believe you. I've been reviewing the materials you presented and the numbers don't add up. Relief flooded through me. Then we need to stop the deal. Patricia shook her head. It's not that simple. Derek has convinced the majority of the board that you're overreacting. He's framing this as you trying to undermine him. I'm trying to protect the company. I know, she said, but Derek has spent months building momentum for this acquisition. He's tied his entire reputation to it. If it falls apart now, he falls with it, and he knows that. I leaned back, frustration rising. So what do we do? I'm calling for an emergency board meeting, Patricia said. I'll present your findings myself, but I need you to be ready to testify if it comes to that. I'm ready. She nodded, then hesitated. Sarah, you need to understand something. If this goes the way I think it will, there will be consequences. For Derek, for Stephen, maybe for others. And they will blame you. I'm already being blamed, I said quietly. Patricia stood, placing a hand on my shoulder. Then let's make sure the truth is worth it. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for the following afternoon, exactly 48 hours after my original presentation. I wasn't allowed in the room, but Patricia texted me updates throughout. Presenting your findings now. Derek is pushing back hard. Stephen just admitted he had concerns but didn't escalate them. Board is divided. Then silence for nearly an hour. Finally, my phone buzzed. They're calling Vanguard's CEO directly. I paced my living room, waiting. Another text. It's falling apart. And then, deal is suspended. Effective immediately. I sank onto the couch, heart pounding. They had listened. Finally, they had listened. But the suspension was only the beginning. Within hours, Vanguard's investors were demanding explanations. News outlets picked up the story. Meridian Capital suspends $1, 8B acquisition amid financial concerns. By evening, Vanguard's stock plummeted. Their CEO resigned. Internal investigations were launched. And then Derek called me. "You destroyed this deal," he said, his voice shaking with fury. "Do you understand what you've done?" "I saved us from a disaster," I replied evenly. "You cost me everything." "No," I said. "You cost yourself everything. I gave you the truth. You chose to ignore it." He hung up. "Hey, I know this is intense, and we're only halfway through. But here's the thing. What happens next changes everything. If you're hooked, if you need to know how this ends, make sure you're subscribed. The best part is coming, and you don't want to miss it. Let's keep going." The fallout moved faster than anyone expected. Within 48 hours of the deal's suspension, federal regulators opened an investigation into Vanguard Dynamics. What I had uncovered as financial inconsistencies turned out to be part of a broader pattern of securities fraud. Executives at Vanguard had been inflating revenue for over 2 years, using shell transactions and falsified delivery records to prop up their valuation. Meridian Capital dodged a bullet. If the acquisition had closed, we would have been liable for billions in losses and potential legal consequences. The board released a statement praising the diligent oversight that prevented a catastrophic mistake. They didn't mention my name. Derek Ashford resigned 3 days later. The official reason was to pursue other opportunities, but everyone knew the truth. He had ignored critical warnings and nearly destroyed the company. Stephen Whitmore was demoted to a compliance oversight role, stripped of his authority. And I was quietly reinstated, my administrative leave erased from the record as if it had never happened. Patricia called me the day I returned to the office. "The board wants to meet with you, privately." I walked into the same conference room where I had been ignored weeks earlier. This time, every seat was filled, and every face turned toward me when I entered. Patricia gestured to the chair at the head of the table. "Please, sit." I sat, feeling the weight of their attention. "Sarah," Patricia began, "we owe you an apology. You brought us critical information, and we failed to act on it. That failure is on us, not you." Another board member, James Hendricks, nodded. "You saved this company. We want to make sure that doesn't go unrecognized." I felt a lump rise in my throat but kept my voice steady. I was doing my job. "You did more than that," Patricia said. "You stood by your principles when it would have been easier to walk away. That kind of integrity is rare." James slid a folder across the table. "We'd like to offer you a new role, Senior Vice President of Risk and Compliance, reporting directly to the board. You'll have full authority to investigate any financial concerns across the company with no interference." I opened the folder, scanning the offer. The salary was nearly double what I'd been making. The authority was real. "We need someone we can trust," Patricia said quietly. "Someone who won't back down when the truth is uncomfortable. That's you." I looked around the table, at the faces of people who had ignored me weeks ago and were now asking me to lead. Part of me wanted to walk away, to punish them for the way they had treated me. But another part, the part that had kept fighting even when it felt hopeless, knew this was an opportunity to build something better. "I accept," I said, "on one condition." Patricia raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "No one, not the CEO, not the CFO, no one, gets to silence concerns brought forward in good faith. If someone sees something wrong, they speak up. And we listen. Every time." James smiled. "Agreed." I signed the contract that afternoon. Over the next few months, I rebuilt the risk oversight structure from the ground up. I hired analysts who weren't afraid to ask hard questions. I implemented protocols that required transparent escalation of concerns. And I made sure that what happened to me would never happen to anyone else. Derek Ashford's name faded from industry headlines, replaced by cautionary tales about unchecked ambition. Stephen Whitmore quietly left the company 6 months later. Vanguard Dynamics declared bankruptcy. Their executives faced criminal charges, and I kept doing the work that mattered, protecting the integrity of the numbers that so many people depended on. One evening, Emma asked me about the news articles she'd seen online. "Mom, were you really the person who stopped that big deal?" I smiled. I was one of many people, but yeah, I played a part. "Are you proud?" she asked. I thought about the ignored presentation, the silencing, the fear, the fight. "Yeah," I said. "I am." She hugged me. "Good, because I'm proud of you too." Looking back, I don't regret speaking up, not for a second. The cost of silence would have been $1.8 billion and the trust of everyone who believed in us. The cost of truth was uncomfortable, risky, and isolating. But truth always costs less in the long run. And when you're the only person willing to pay that price, you learn something crucial. Integrity isn't about being right. It's about doing what's right, even when no one else will stand with you. Derek ignored my presentation because listening would have meant admitting he was wrong. 48 hours later, that choice cost him everything. I'll carry that lesson with me for the rest of my career. And I hope, if you're ever in a room where the truth is being ignored, you'll remember this story and find the courage to speak anyway. So here's my question for you. Have you ever been in a situation where you knew the truth but no one would listen? What did you do? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one, and I'd love to hear from you. And if this story moved you, if it made you think differently about courage and integrity, subscribe to this channel. We have more stories like this. Stories about people who refused to stay silent when it mattered most. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And I'll see you in the next one.